Hello and welcome to another Insurindex podcast, this time in association with BIBA. We are just in the month of May, May the 1st, as we record this, a session that's going to be about claims, which is a particular focus for the BIBA Conference this year and going forward. My name is Ben Bolton, because a lot of people won't know me on this podcast, because this will go out to a wider audience into the BIBA membership, both before the conference and after. I'm the managing director of Grace Church, which is a research company, and many of you will know that we do research across the UK on both claims and placing, with representative groups of brokers in partnership with BIBA. So I'm delighted today to welcome Andrew Gibbons. Andrew is MD of Mason Owen, a broker in Liverpool, and he will introduce himself in a second. Most importantly, Andrew will be chairing a claims session at the BIBA Conference at 10:55, 5 to 11. We've got to be precise about these things, on the second day of the conference, okay? So please, if you have the time, go in, have a look. There's a great panel. There's Rachel Lamb, the Ombudsman, Director for Insurance. There's Richard Napoli, who's Claims Director and Legal Director of Markel. And always interesting, Bruce Hepburn, who's CEO of McTavish. I'm sure he'll have a few interesting things to say. And someone else who has just been announced, I've been told by Andrew, is Brian Moore, who's the Claims Supply Chain Director at Aviva. So that, again, will really make an interesting panel. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be great. So, Andrew, brilliant to have you here talking about claims, one of my pet subjects, I think. We love claims. We've been doing it for 15 years. Just give us a quick intro as to what your role is and
Sure.
and your a brief history of your career, I guess.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm sensing a double act coming here. We've got Bolton with the lad from Bolton. So,
And I was born in Bolton, by the way.
Absolutely. I thought we had to get Bolton in here somehow, and we thought we would start early.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm Andrew Gibbons, of course, Managing Director of Mason Owen Financial Services. I've run that business now for just over 25 years. We came from fairly humble beginnings, but specialised in the property sphere, extending laterally into more specialist areas such as legal indemnity insurance and a variety of other things that we do for SMEs and corporate clients. I got a tap on the shoulder quite a few years ago as well from BIBA to get involved a little bit more with their operations, and that led to me moving into chairing the Merseyside, West Cheshire, North Wales and Isle of Man region. We always tag Isle of Man on there for tax reasons.
Yeah.
And then latterly through the second chair of the then newly formed Smaller Brokers Advisory Board, which I did for 7 years, which meant that I was a main board member at BIBA for the same 7-year period. But of course, working at the same time in the organisation as being a board member, they had a slight issue with claims back in the day. Many people will remember the BIBA member claim survey that was done about 14 years ago now, which ended up in a rather public debate, let's call it,
Yes.
between the ABI and BIBA over claims. And that was in between the FCA thematic review on household and motor that then led into the commercial claims review. And it was felt that they'd set up the industry claims working group. Sadly, Malcolm Harvey was unable to take up the chair back in the day, and I was asked, would I consider doing that? I had a background in broking, of course, but previously had been in underwriting and sales with provincial insurance, which ultimately became AXA. So I was at provincial stroke AXA for 13 years on the underwriting side. And when Graham asked me to chair the industry claims working group, I said, Graham, I've never done a day's work in claims in my life. To which he responded, you're absolutely perfect for this because you're carrying no baggage.
Yeah.
So we had the first meeting of the claims working group soon after that. And from fairly humble beginnings, the we're still here now, 13, 14 years later, now looking at a potential, the next FCA thematic review into what we think will be household motor and perhaps travel as well. So that's a bit of a history to me and maybe why I'm here this morning.
No, it's really good. And I just wanted to give a quick kind of sense of, that when you kind of started, and all these reviews have happened and you've been involved with it, is your sense, before we get into it, that things have changed or moved on very much in claims? Or
from the first meeting that we had and some of the issues that prevailed then, the claims landscape is completely different to what it was then. I'm not saying that insurers and or brokers weren't more concentrated on claims then, because I don't think that was the case. I just think we were in different times. Technology's moved on hugely in both the operation in brokers' offices and insurers' offices, and perhaps most importantly in the supply chain. We do everything on our mobile phones these days, don't we? And the ability to report claims through apps and stuff like that has revolutionized really some of the things that we can do in claims. We can have people looking around their own houses, showing insurers damage on apps, and they can actually measure up the room as to how much it's going to cost to redecorate and so on. We couldn't do that 15 years ago, or if we could, it was a very narrow group of people who were able to embrace that technology. Now all you need is a teenager and a laptop.
Yeah, and that we'll touch on that a little bit later, but in general terms, that technology opportunity, it seems to me, really, for the whole industry, but claims in particular, it seems nobody really knows the answer as to how far you can go with it, but it seems like it's a long way, isn't it, really? And it could really transform the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure we'll get on to talking about later on, that there is a great deal of we can, but there's also maybe some airs of caution of whether we should. So I'm not a Luddite. I'd love to see advancement in technology, but we perhaps at some points in time need to question ourselves as to whether we're doing the right thing, because we want the right outcome. Just be a little bit cautious about what the unintended consequences of that technology
and I think we've seen those certainly through some of the research that we've done, where companies have kind of rushed to the technology, effectively fired people, and then had to pick up the pieces afterwards, and it takes a long time to fix that when that happens. Not just it's bad for customer outcomes, I think, but it's also bad for the organisations themselves.
It is. I think insurance in general, I'm sure other trade sectors are in a similar position to us, that we have lost a tremendous amount of experience from this sector post-COVID for a variety of reasons, and quite often it can be experience that can't be replaced. So you've got to be mindful of having technology in place, but some very skilled people and decision makers above it to make sure it's deployed correctly and has the right outcome.
Great. So let's just talk a bit, get a bit of context as to what you're going to be talking about or chairing. I guess you don't know yet, but what you're going to try and talk about at this session on claims at the BIBA Conference.
Yeah, I think the first thing I've got to say is that I think we're the main event. I think Anthony Joshua is a support act on day 2 at the BIBA Conference, and the claim session at 10:55.
You will overshadow that with that.
Absolutely.
And Gareth Southgate as well, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the only time I'm going to be on the same bill as those two, isn't it? So we've got to make hay while the sun shines.
Yes.
But yeah, I think, in all seriousness, I think the session is going to be quite engaging. I know from the BIBA team already, I think the auditorium holds about 235 people, and we've got 420 registered. So there's obviously an interest in that, not wishing to put undue pressure on ourselves to deliver. But when we spoke to the panel, we've had a couple of meetings to identify what we think are the things that we should be concentrating on. It was 5 key pillars really that we think claims underpins: trust, reputation, there's regulatory issues and the impact of that, consumer scrutiny, and ultimately the value to customers of the products that we're distributing. So around that framework, we've tried to look at the areas that we want to guide the panel to answer questions on, looking at things like systems, processes, supply chains, technology. Some of the great improvements that we've made as an industry. Looking back at the floods a good few years ago, with David Cameron stood on the banks of the Thames in his green wellies and his Barber jacket, telling people they should get insurers they should get people back into the properties. To the situation that occurred in the last main storms, when the insurers are very much better prepared for storms coming now rather than trying to react to them. And I know for a fact that I think over the course of the weekend of the last major storms that occurred over a weekend, Aviva had 4,000 calls in that weekend, and most of them were answered within 20 seconds. That means they're engaging with the customers and they're getting their own colleagues mobilised to be able to provide that initial response to help the consumers. So that is a huge stride that we've made in terms of where we were and where we are now. And improvements like that continue to be made. So that's the sort of area we're looking at, whether technology and things like AI can come into the piece, and looking at general communication.
And also about the idea of partnering, isn't it? The partnership and collaborating, which I always think is so important in this. When you've got a chain, effectively.
Exactly, but that's what the Industry Claims Working Group does. We have these conversations behind closed doors rather than publicly. We look at emerging issues. We look at regulatory issues. We look at bad practice. But we talk about it, and we try to talk about and demonstrate what good practice looks like, how we can avoid the pitfalls and ending up in the press, because for every 9 bad stories that we get in the press, there's only ever one good. And actually, the balance of the number of claims that go wrong is completely the other way. 99% plus of claims are paid by most insurers. We're talking about 1%, and 1%'s not acceptable, but we're trying to restore some of the balance to what we do. And we do that through engaging with regulator, engaging with our stakeholders, and partnering with insurers. And the last meeting we had the FOS present at the meeting, just to show that we're fairly transparent with what we want to do. And I know that at the next meeting, the Ombudsman will be present, so we're looking at some of the issues that they are bringing to the table as well.
Really interesting. It'll be really interesting. Yeah, brilliant. That's the session. What I really want to kind of start with around claims itself is how important these days is claims service to commercial brokers in terms of helping them to be successful in their own businesses, because we hear a lot about this.
Yeah, I think generally, I think it is important. I mean, it's almost a daft thing to say that if it wasn't important, what are we in business for? Because that's to a certain extent the true test of the service that we're providing. I mean, we I can speak for our firm. We became a chartered firm. We were one of the first 30 chartered firms in the country. What we wanted to do for our customers was demonstrate professionalism and quality of everything that we do. So we are sort of still less focused on quantity and more on quality, making sure that when people phone us, they can speak to an individual rather than be passed around. And I suppose to a certain extent, we've got a slight disproportionate deployment of colleagues in claims to make sure that we can affect the handling of claims that we can influence. So there's less of a service aspect, no less importance to a liability claim, which will which may take years to solve, and obviously we're on top of those as well. But the ones where we can impact on service, the motor claims, the household claims, we don't do massive volumes of that, but certainly commercial claims where you can help to mitigate business interruption losses, see things that are coming down the track that the client might not be aware of. In fact, we're currently writing at BIBA through the claims working group an SME claims guide. And the claims guide is not, if we started at the beginning of that project looking at various different classes of insurance, and it would be akin to trying to write the Bible if we were trying to look at all sorts of eventualities that could happen in various classes. So what we've done is we've concentrated on things that might derail a claim that the client's unaware of. Things that a vocabulary, defining particular areas of claims, and the words we use in insurance that we sometimes forget is not general public speak. It's jargon.
It's jargon.
So we try to define some of the words that they may be unfamiliar with. We've looked at, say, the top 10 reasons why claims might not be paid. Looking at things like disclosure and things like if you don't maintain your flat roof, your felt on timber flat roof, the insurer is unlikely to pay for that because that could be a wear and tear issue. So, and even the ombudsman and the regulator accept that not all claims are covered, but similarly, we can deal with a lot of that at the advice stage, where brokers are involved. But we can also provide wraparound advice at claim stage to make sure these claims don't go off the rails, and that is key to a what I would see a modern broker's operation as being.
And I can hear Mr. Trudgill's voice in my ear at this moment saying, tell him about the value of the broker. But that is what you're talking about. I mean, I'm going through a claim at the moment. My father passed away. We've got his flat in probate. Anyway, there's a problem with it, and I won't bore you with the problem. But there's no broker involved, and it is, quite frankly, a bit of a mess, really, when that's not happening. And we could really do with that, but we're having to do all of that ourselves, and it's an enormous amount of time and quite stressful, actually.
Well, I don't wish to disrespect any insurers who may deal direct with the public. That's not what I'm about to say, but I think what the broker can do in terms of providing that advice is the broker's independent and we're acting for the client. But we're the professional. We know the jargon. We know what buttons to press with the insurer. And I don't know what the premium is on that case, but if you're spending £500 with the insurance company, we're spending millions of pounds with the insurance company, and there's a certain amount of commercial negotiation that can be brought to the table if in the event that so there are a variety of things that affect claims, but I think we generally know the process. And that's a big tick in the box from the broker's point of view, because hopefully it'll.
And it's where the commercial link makes sense, isn't it, between the insurer and then the broker, because the broker can say, well, I actually need this customer to be satisfied and to have a good experience. It's in my interests to do that. Yeah.
So we're professional buyers of insurance, and we're also, as part of the service that we're selling to the client, specialists in dealing with claims as well.
Yeah, and we do a huge amount of research, and I think we meet so many claims people, and for the most part, I think they're all very committed, to doing the right thing and wanting to do the right thing. I think we'll talk a bit about this next, but I think there are obstacles, as we know, but I think most people do want to do the right thing.
100%.
And I think that's the good thing, really. We should tell that story much more.
I think that anyone who suggests that insurers generally do not want to pay claims is at the wrong party.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think things happen and things occur within a big industry, but I agree with you. I think for the most part, the intent is there. I think it's challenging, though, isn't it? It's a challenging job, claims. I just wanted to quickly ask, I mean, do you think it's getting more important as a selling point as we go forward, as the customer, as we kind of move more towards the customer, as perhaps we have done before?
I think it's becoming more of a public issue.
Yes.
With organisations such as which bringing the consumer lobby to
Yeah.
to insurance much more than maybe we've seen in the past. I don't believe there's anything wrong with people highlighting bad practice, whether it be in insurance, whether it be in banking or non-financial services. But I also think there's got to be an element of proportionality about it.
Yeah.
I've already mentioned earlier in this conversation that more than 99% of claims do get paid.
Yeah.
So there's a 1% that doesn't, and things do go wrong, and large organisations with the best will in the world, systems can go wrong. But we'd like to think that people can override systems, and where there's evidence that something goes wrong, there's the ability to be able to put it right and put it right rather quickly.
Yeah. So that's great, Andrew. One of the things I definitely want to get into now is just a bit about the thing that we look at all the time, which is claims service, and that is the thing that often gets criticised. I think it's without doubt was a problem through COVID, and I think that exposed the industry to a lot of criticism at the time. But we're kind of past that, and so I really wanted to get your kind of view of quality of claim service now from insurers, and where your sense of where it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think personal experience of claim service during COVID that we experienced with our business was just a little bit slower. Than it was previously. But with all the supply chain issues that the world had, I think that the profession should be allowed a little bit of leeway on that. But I don't think there was a drop in quality. Over that particular period of time. In fact, I think some insurers, in our experience, tried to bend over backwards to help customers that were particularly encumbrance, setting aside, of course, the COVID business interruption claims. The BI issue was unprecedented from my experience, and I think many others in the industry. But coming out of COVID, I think the biggest issue that we had, that we saw initially was, I think many insurers didn't have their telephony quite right, and contacting people was difficult when they still had lots of people working from home and all the rest of it. And as things came back together, I think we're back to, let's just say, normal now. In terms of normal service being resumed, and I think claim service is generally pretty good at the moment. There are pockets. There will always be pockets with particular insurers who may have individual issues that they're dealing with, mergers, acquisitions, relocations, things that go on within big business that have an unintended consequence on one department or another. But generally speaking, I think my claims team are generally quiet. In their criticism of the people we deal with at the moment.
Yes,
I think with that isolated pocket.
I think we had. I mean, I did the BIBA tour of the regions probably 2 years ago. The first time I did it, and at that one, every single session, people were moaning about claims, saying it was a problem. To a year later, that was largely gone. Interestingly, and in our own surveys, we've seen the situation improve from one which wasn't great to one which I think I would agree with you is kind of normal, kind of above acceptable, I suppose. And we'd say that's good. I also think there is just a huge amount of competition now around service generally, brokers and insurers. And it seems to me that claims is becoming one of those areas where, certainly from our conversations and our work with insurers, they're saying we're going to use that to create competitive edge. So it must be healthy for the industry, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I speak to insurers at quite a high level, and we're fortunate enough to meet some of the senior directors within some of the major companies, and I know they're all quite pleased about the NPS scores that they're returning. Which we as a broker, relatively small, they're big. They can research their clients in much greater depth than we can, and if they're seeing shifts in their trends that become positive, then you've got to take notice of that. And when we're placing business, we'll look at things like that as to to advise the customer as to who they should insure with, because not the likelihood of a claim being paid, but the claim service that they will get
experience.
is maybe better than somebody else. And if brokers are regularly doing that to actually placing business with an eye on what might happen, particularly if a business is prone to have a lot of claims, which many businesses are, not through lack of management, just because of the nature of the business. So you've got to be aware of things like that when at the placement end of the business.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know we run a quality mark scheme, and that's been really popular because I think insurers want to prove that, and I think it is for us now much more about the experience and the actual settlement and the payment of the claim. Whereas I think probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we started, the tick in the box for the insurer was, well, we paid it, so what? But actually, the customer was dissatisfied with how it was handled and all sorts of things. So I think the industry has really grown up in that sense now, and we can talk in a minute about sort of what the drivers for that are, but I think that is a big shift.
I was with the senior directors of senior leadership team at Allianz last week, and they were most grateful for the ticks that they were given by our organisation.
Well, it's genuine. I mean, they get it. We interview claims specialists and who deal with a lot of claims, so it's. My nervousness sometimes is, well, when I go in front of an advisory board at BIBA or whatever, I do a talk and they go, well, we don't believe you, those scores are too good. I think what I do get a lot of feedback about is about inconsistencies now, and we draw attention to that, which is that there is a great range of service in the industry. And brokers, when they have to use different players, I think you're right. I think you need some, and I think it would be good to have more measures like this to show what's good and what good looks like, as long as the measures are good, I think.
Yeah, if two insurers are quoting the same premium, what's going to differentiate the advice that the broker's going to give? How well they pay the claim?
Yeah. And I think that will matter. And to some extent, it seems to me sensible that the customer should see that as well, alongside the broker. It seems fair that you go, right, okay, because that hasn't been there. I mean, it's there a bit in personal lines through FIFO and things, but not really for commercial, is it?
No.
Good. So maybe just touch a little bit on regulation.
Sure.
There has been quite a lot of different types of regulation, and there's thematic reviews, which you mentioned earlier. What's your and you've got a regulator on the panel, effectively. So
yes,
So you're going to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, we are. I think we just want the regulators' views on. The Ombudsman Rachel Lamb will be on the panel, so I think we're just wanting her to touch on some of the issues that they're seeing and that brokers and insurers should try to look to avoid. I mean, we get the Ombudsman report through on a monthly basis where you can see examples of what they're dealing with, and that should really be a training guide as to just highlighting what bad practice looks like. Therefore, it can highlight what good practices it looks like as well, because let's not forget the Ombudsman does uphold quite a lot in favour of insurers and brokers. So we should be mindful of the fact that particularly the Ombudsman service can be a learning experience for us all as individuals. But I just think the concentration on fair value and consumer duty and outcomes is the principles that the culture of businesses has to adopt, in particular in claims, because you mentioned it earlier. The outcome's not always, well, they paid the claim. The experience of the individual or the business through that process. I think the customer's got to feel valued through that process and respected, and one eye on the fact that insurers have got to be mindful of fraud, which is something that's going to cost all policyholders money. But the sympathetic nature with which we look at fraud and then ultimately treat the customer through the claims process with an outcome. I think when I go back to when I first joined the industry, and it was a very old traditional tariff, non-tariff companies, and we were just coming out of that, and you had the claims superintendent sat upstairs, and the glasses perched on the end of his nose, had ultimate, whatever, those days are long gone.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the customer centric nature of the way businesses develop now is completely different to that traditional way that things perhaps used to be dealt with, and that's something that you don't see anymore.
No, and I think you make a great point about culture, and something that we've been looking at is that insurers have historically tended to think inside out about the inputs and the processes, and of course they're bureaucratic. So that's almost the easiest thing to do. Is if you're an internal person in a claims team, you impress your boss, not the customer. And I think that's
I think I would say just pre-COVID and going into COVID, some of the stuff that might happen. This is anecdotal. I've got no proof of this, but I think a lot of people were looking at the systems. They were looking at supply chains, how we can save money here, how we can do this, how we can do that better, and actually just took the eye off the ball a little bit. And what those systems, I felt in certain circumstances, prevented was people dealing with people, because that's what insurance industry is about: people dealing with people, and it took what I would class as the common sense out of the claims process. And sometimes when often you were looking at things that you were receiving around that time, you were thinking, have you really looked at what you've written, or have you really listened to yourself as to what you've just said? And that common sense overlaid on top of the technical probity, if you like, of how we deal with what is, whether it be household, motor, or commercial insurance, an extremely complex commercial contract. Because that's what we're dealing with. So, but people don't often reflect on insurance as a complicated commercial contract. But that's what it is.
Yeah, it is. And I think the language has changed as well from insurers now. I can't think of any really that don't say that service is their kind of number one priority. I think some pay lip service to that, and some do it fantastically well, as you'd get in any industry. But I do think that cost-driven kind of approach, which is really a race to the bottom, isn't it? When you get that, and I think it'd be great to prove it, but I think there is kind of proof that once you have that service culture and you deliver that, that's actually really good for business generally all round, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow the pie, not.
But one thing that some of the major insurers have done is put in customer relationship managers into the claims function, which you always have that on the sales side, but you don't have it on the claims. And basically, when in my experience, my long experience now, if a claim starts to go wrong, it's like a train. And the train's going down the track merrily, and then it gets to the points and it suddenly starts going down the wrong track.
Yeah, exactly right.
Suddenly, it's almost impossible unless you stop the train, reverse it, get back to the points, and put it back on the right track. Can you start to settle that claim properly? And sometimes taking it out of the technical claims function, putting a little bit more emphasis on the relationship side of things, and being able to say, can you just have a look at that? Could you go in a slightly different way, have a chat, and let's see if we can get that back on the right track? It helps a lot, and I think that's certainly been a step forward.
I agree, and we've been strong advocates, I think, with our clients on this, that because where we see relationship managers in place, the scores are much better, and brokers are just generally much happier because they can solve those things. And the other thing is on first notification of loss, for example, that's kind of, if it doesn't go right there, it tends to go wrong, as you say, from that point onwards, and then it becomes very expensive because typically you get litigation and lawyers and all sorts. So I think that's an industry lesson that is only being learned quite slowly, but it would be really worth emphasising, I think, because it's. I don't think it's an easy one to take to the finance director or explain, but it's so important to have that kind of, right, this is what it is, commercially understand what it is, have the empathy for whatever the thing is, and then it goes well from there on.
I mean, to use something within the regulatory space of vulnerability. Most people who've had a claim could be in a particularly distressed state.
Of course.
And may say something on the first notification of loss that ultimately sets that claim down the wrong path, whether it may sound like fraud or something else. But I think sometimes we've just got to remember that people react differently under stress, and as I've already mentioned with the jargon that we use, it can lead to misinterpretation, and hence the reason why the SME claims guide that's hopefully going to be launched by BIBA in the next couple of months might give brokers and clients something as a sales aid, or clients the opportunity to be aware of that before they actually embark on making that first call.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to quickly talk about outsourcing, because obviously this is growing very rapidly. So what they call, another bit of jargon, delegated, but basically outsourcing the claims. We've come across issues, we know there are issues, and inevitably there are going to be issues. And I know the regulator has talked about this they've talked to me about it in person about they tend to view that outsourcing is worse than insourcing. I mean, I don't have a particular view on whether it is or it isn't, because I think it varies, but I'd be interested in your view as to what is kind of happening around all that stuff.
Yeah, I think a couple of things spring to mind. You can get very good outsourced arrangements.
Yeah.
You can get some not so good outsourced arrangements. Without naming names,
No.
I'm not going into any of that. But it's like you get good insurers, you get bad insurers, you get good brokers, you get bad brokers. So I think you've got to be mindful, as I said earlier, in terms of the distribution side of things, as to where you're placing your business, as to what their outsourced claims might be. But accepting that outsourced arrangements exist, they can actually present problems in terms of the claim settlement. That suggestion of a claim going down the wrong route, if it gets down the wrong route, it's much more difficult to escalate it, because where do you escalate it to? Do you escalate it through the third-party arrangement? Do you escalate it with the insurer? And we've had direct experience of that recently with one of the major insurers that we deal with, and it was very difficult to get that claim back on track, and it was almost like the insurer had to go up and over and back down the chain to get that particular claim back on track. But we did it, and ultimately the right outcome
and
occurred.
You made a really important point earlier on about the industry moving away from that kind of cost thing. But I think with a lot of these outsourcing arrangements, the driver has been cost efficiency, or that's taken over. And then you've lost another really important point you made, which is all about communication. And again, so if you don't invest in that communication and you don't decide that this is actually your proposition as a carrier, you're not abdicating responsibility, then I think you have problems, don't you?
Yeah, I'm sure that there are performance-related obligations in those outsourced contracts, but are they aligned to the cost-benefit analysis of the insurer or the cost-benefit analysis of the customer? I don't know. I'm not in a position to be able to say.
No, I think it's. I mean, I was at a delegated outsourcing conference the other day, and I think people were saying it's incredibly messy, both the administration of all of that. Guess what? The insurance industry is messy administration. Who'd believed it? But incredibly messy and quite difficult. And a lot of those are kind of financial drivers. But one of the speakers said, we don't want just financial drivers. We want to be an extension of the insurer and deliver great service, for example, because that gives us, that's what you're investing in.
Exactly. If that's the financial driver, if that's the driver per se, then that's great. But it's how you align those two together, I suppose, and then prosecute that deal. Or prosecute that arrangement and ensure that it delivers exactly what it's supposed to deliver for the customer.
Good. So we've touched on this before, but talent is clearly an issue for the whole industry. Gets talked about a lot. How is it? What's your kind of take on that in the claim space?
Yeah, I think the claim space is no different to the general space, in that I think insurers and brokers alike have found it really, really difficult to fill the number of roles that they've got, and I've got my own views on this. In that there was a period of time where, unlike when I came into the industry, it was contractual that I had to take my professional exams, and in order to progress through the organisation, it was contractual. If I didn't do it, that's something that through the charter status in our firm we've instilled on anybody who joins our business as well. They need a minimum qualification insurance. Why shouldn't they? Because if you're advising customers on insurance, why shouldn't you have an element of qualification? And so I think the insurers, for a variety of reasons, sort of stopped doing that for a particular time period. That's not the case now. I mean, insurers are investing in their talent hugely, and looking at apprenticeships, and some even extending those apprenticeship levies to help brokers such as ourselves put our people through apprenticeships to bring them on. So there's a technical side of things, but I do think we still lag behind the accountancies and legal professions and all the rest of it about selling this fantastic industry that we work in. It's the best kept secret in the world, perhaps, in the variety of jobs you can go into. But I think that lack of investment a good number of years ago, and the fact that we lost so much talent post-COVID just because people retired, walked away, whatever. I think we're still struggling to replace those, both in maybe quality and volume, because we lost. You can't just replace 35, 40 years of experience overnight, because the next level down were 20 years. So there's still a big gap, and you learn a lot in 20 years. So I think we're wrestling with that in the wider sense. But maybe that gap can be filled with technology in certain areas, but not all areas.
Yeah. And I remember I was reading a quote from Robert Hiscox about the insurance industry versus banking, saying how banking had let its customers down really badly. You know, all they cared about was the money, but insurance had a chance, and really should have that kind of empathetic approach, because that's how you create a successful industry. And I think he's right about that.
Yeah,
but you're right. I think we have risked going towards the banking sort of model at times, where it's only about the money. We know businesses have to make money, but actually it does feel to me at the moment that there is a bit of sense of purpose in what we're about, and that we're a bit different.
Yeah, I think the number of times that I've heard in my career that people buy from people. 100%. Yeah, it's true. I mean, we've got a generation now that like to buy online. They like to do a lot of things on the mobile phone, but the mobile phone doesn't help them when it goes wrong unless they actually use the keypad and dial somebody and speak. Quite often, email, a very, very impersonal, at times, method of communication, and the perception of the receiver of an email, it can be completely different from the perception of when you actually send it. So it's not a great medium to sometimes communicate the finer points of how a particular claim should be dealt with, and to try to encourage an insurer to maybe take a different line in the way they're going to settle it. So I think the people are incredibly important, and being available to our customers to speak to them and explain.
From what you've said, and we've talked about in this podcast, what comes out is just how important communication is to our industry.
100%.
I know it is everywhere, but it seems to me that because of the nature of what we do, which is that people, as you said, are often in distress or something's very difficult. And I think also because you sell a policy and then the claim will come later, and you, as a customer, I think even when we're in the industry, we think, well, will it be paid? Is it going to happen? Is it going to be a problem? It's a stressful thing to have to do. It would be great if we could take the stress away from that.
So we've got to look at why people buy from people, and that's because people are accountable and machines are not. And at some point in time, as a broker, you've got to look your client in the eye and say, I did my best for you. The outcome probably wasn't what you'd hoped for or expected, but I can sit here hand on heart and say that the outcome is the right one. It might not be palatable, because it can't always be palatable, but it's the right one. But you've got to be accountable for that, and it takes a very dispassionate person to be able to sit in front of a client and tell them a half truth or an untruth about something like that. And brokers are not like that. That's why we're here. That's why people continue to buy insurance through us, because we provide that reinsurance at the time of most need.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of technology we've got? There's quite a lot of players now with claims portals, and they've had them for
Yeah.
quite a long time. I think they generally get quite well rated in our surveys.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a kind of sweet spot between that and the people.
Yeah.
How are they for your people? How are you kind of seeing that sort of technology? Because it's going to be AI and everything coming soon, isn't it?
All right, so there's a massive range here that we're talking about. So, one of the biggest advancements is, from an insurer's perspective, I'm sure, is the fact that people carry their mobile phones everywhere.
Yes.
So, in terms of first notification of loss from of things like road accidents, to enable the client to follow a step-by-step procedure as to what they can do, massively reducing the third-party injury claims in that context, getting control of the claim early, having photographs. Client being able to make statements on the app and submit it as an FNOL straight away. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Saved a lot of time and stress in getting those claims notified and protecting a client's position, let's not forget.
Yeah.
Fabulous advancement in technology. You've got advancements in technology from insurers who, in the claims function, are able to use apps to measure walls of damaged property to calculate the cost of reinstatement without actually going to the property. Client taking the video camera around on the mobile phone. Again, great use of technology and massive time savings there. Very positive. Some of the portals that you mentioned in brokers' offices, again, there's been some massive savings in there. A couple of insurers have got portals that my team can go on and look where a claim's up to, who's got it, where it's up to. Saves the insurer and us loads and loads of phone calls.
Yeah.
We can produce reports off that. That's superb. Massive time saving measures. But then we're looking now at one of the insurers. Aviva have just developed an FNOL for motor claims through Acturis. Jury's still out on whether that's going to be a great saving for us, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, good experiment.
So, is it good, bad, or indifferent? I don't think we've used it long enough yet to be able to determine if that's going to be as radical as some of the things I've just mentioned. But then we move into the other space, the AI space.
Yeah.
One of the questions in the conference we're going to be asking the audience is should AI be used to determine liability for a claim? We've got a couple of questions that we're going to ask the audience in the podcast just to see what the Snap survey is. What's the feeling in the market? Because there are already insurers out there who do use AI to determine whether claims are paid or not. I think in the travel space and so on. But in terms of AI, what are we going to use it for? Just because we can doesn't mean to say we should, because we don't know what the unintended consequences are going to be. So I think we've got to be really careful and look after the people, because at the end of the day, it's my view that I think we can use AI to churn information, allow a claims handler to be able to see a hugely summarized version of a file while they're on a telephone conversation, which will inform the discussion that they're then going to have with the client, rather than say, can't speak to you at the minute, got to ring you back, got to go and get the file, or got to read through the file. Things like that can speed up the process, that helps the human come to the right decision. But the oversight of that IT, in my opinion, and the AI debate is that humans are the ones with common sense.
I think you're right, and I'm not going to try and answer that question.
No,
I'm going to try and answer it at the conference, but I do think there is still a sort of sense that AI is going to help, as you say, in the heavy lifting of the stuff that we don't like doing. And we're not always that good at, because we miss the details and things. And then I'm in an area I think I've just been reading about, which is very interesting, is equipping people with kind of almost briefing notes about things. And I thought, well, that would really apply well in claims, because if there's I remember talking to a big insurer a few years ago, and they said, oh God, we'd realised that when we had motor accidents on FNOL, the first question we asked was, what's happened to the car? And they said, when we looked at it, we had this light bulb moment where we realised we shouldn't do that. We should ask the customer, how are you? And going back to the AI, I think it's like, I've seen now in a lot of call centres, they're beginning to introduce these things. So you kind of, not in a Big Brother way, but you just monitor and say, oh, by the way, you should really mention such and such when you're talking to the customer. And that, I think, could be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the time spent with claims handlers is writing up the telephone note after they've had the telephone conversation.
Yes.
Well, I think AI generated minutes
that.
of the call logged against the file
Yeah.
i- is a lot more efficient than the person sitting there writing the notes out and then
Yeah.
scanning them on or doing whatever they do
I
with them or
completely
typing
agree.
them
I mean, I've
So
had my 40 years in business or something. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think that, the whole thing of meeting notes is
yeah,
they've been sporadic since the day I started, and they
yeah.
still are. But if an AI can do it, brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that technology is improving all the time, and I know that some carriers have deployed things like that already.
Great. So, just finish off on a couple of things. One, when I go to BIBA meetings, the brokers always used to say to me, "Ben, you've got to realise that brokers love moaning." So I'll give you a chance to not moan and tell a couple of positive stories, because
Yeah,
I like the constructive stories as well.
yeah.
So,
Well, I think there's looking back over the time, we've had some really really complicated claims and no names, of course, but one of the most famous claims that we dealt with was a case where soon after the client had bought the property, um, it had a fire, and I mean soon after. I'm talking before the file even got from the investment department office to
oh no,
the property management office. I'm talking 3 or 4 days here. The place burnt down, the big old mill, up in the north of England, as we have several
yeah,
properties of that nature.
mm.
Maliciously set fire, allegedly. I don't think it was ever proven, but who it was, but the CCTV clearly showed
Yeah,
that there was accelerant used, and the there were 2 or 3 tenants in there, and one of them in particular was looking to create a little bit of havoc and invoke the Fire Prevention Metropolis Act 1886,
oh nice,
which
yeah,
had
yeah.
us all running back to the
Interesting. Yeah,
textbooks.
I know it well.
But long story short, the reinstatement cost assessment hadn't been done correctly by the client when they set the sum insured, and there was a huge amount of underinsurance. But
Right.
in terms of, I think we had 42,000 square feet that burnt down. But in the scheme that we agreed with the insurer at the time, which was a really, really innovative way of settling this claim, the client actually ended up with 20,000 square feet of modern retail
Right.
space, geared up to modern construction standards,
Wow.
and effectively ended up with an increased value of their property. I'm
Brilliant.
not saying the insurer overpaid the claim; they didn't. They paid
Yeah.
exactly what they should have paid. The biggest problem was that the bulldozers were moving into knock the place down
Yeah.
before the client could even get there because it was in a dangerous state.
Yeah.
But effectively, they got a cleared site. They got some money to recompense them, and they were already going to invest money in that property anyway. So they
Yeah.
invested what they had, got a property back, and ended up at
Yeah.
increasing the value of that site by about 75% because the claim was settled properly.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of value that we can bring to.
And so over a longer period, presumably then that insurer will keep that
Yeah.
premium, and it will cover the
absolutely
cost. Yeah.
absolutely. But there's many instances of claims like that. But I'm going to put a little bit of a moan in here because the biggest thing that we and insurers are dealing with at the minute is the fact that whether it be economic pressure, whether it be lack of understanding from the policyholder, or what, underinsurance is the biggest problem that
Yeah.
we have. Full stop.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand the consequences of what underinsurance can bring in terms of claim settlement, and it also means that the insurer's not perhaps getting the right premium for the risk.
Yeah.
Insurers, brokers, and everybody's doing loads and loads of work at the front end of the business to try and remove from that problem, or get away from that problem. But it's
it's a big issue.
It's a tough gig.
Yeah, it is very hard. Great. Just to finish off now, and obviously we're just a couple of weeks away from 10,000 people nearly descending on Manchester, and 450 in the claim session. So, what are you hoping, Andrew? For the session? I know you've had some discussions, obviously, about it. What are you hoping will come out of it?
The first thing that you notice is that it's the time of year when you see more suits in Manchester than at any other time of the year. I'm hoping that the weather is kind, as it always seems to be when we have it. So I've probably put the kiss of death on that now.
Hold you to that.
But I just think that the amount of networking that goes on and the business that's done at that particular conference every year has increased year on year on year, and the teams at BIBA do a fantastic job in putting the conference on, and B, producing a fantastic event. I think the pressure's on every year for the team to continue to do better year on year, but they consistently seem to do that because attendance keeps going up. And if attendance is going up, it's obviously the place to be. And I think I look at some of the conferences I've been on in the property space and whatever, and there's some flagship events out there, and I think this is up there with them. The number of people who go, and it's an opportunity for brokers to get to see people at a really senior level within insurers. It's a good opportunity for insurers to hear sometimes a bit too raucously after a beverage or two. Just what their service might be like, good, bad, or indifferent. But generally speaking, I think it's all done in the right way, and a lot of people take a lot of things away from BIBA. That's why I'm keen for my colleagues to be able to be exposed to it and go if they wish to, and that's something that we've done for a good number of years now. It's really convenient for us, seeing as that it's in Manchester, but whilst it's on your doorstep, you've got to embrace it. We've had people going through the young broker days and stuff like that at BIBA, as well as the more senior events. But it's just a fantastic program that they continue to put on.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That was really interesting. I think we've put the world of claims to rights, but you're going to do that even more at the conference itself.
Or if people have listened to this podcast, they might actually be bringing their rotten tomatoes.
Well, they might, yes. Well, I did a session a few years ago on service, and Graham's words were, "Good luck with that." We had insurers and brokers on the panel, but it actually went very well because of exactly what you say, which is, I think there's a kind of there's a real spirit of collaboration,
and I think there's honest debate.
Honest
about
debate.
We've got some real key industry leaders, and Bruce is not to be missed. I think my biggest challenge is with the 30 minutes that were allotted to keep Bruce's first answer to below 29.
Well, absolutely, I agree with that. I know that is going to be a challenge. He's always got a lot to say, Bruce,
absolutely.
So but so thanks again, Andrew. That was really fantastic. And we're going to be producing some exclusive content. This is part of it around claims for the conference. So there'll be some stuff before, during, and after. So thank you, and we hope you out there enjoy this.
Thank you.